I'd like to say that tonight's reading is sponsored in coordination with the Academy of American Poets, the Friends of ASU Libraries, and the ASU Creative Writing Program. Joy Harjo is a poet of the Southwest. Her most recent book is She Had Some Horses, and she is on the writing faculty at the University of Arizona. Joy Harjo.
I've had to deal with so many of these things. I need to take a course in creative miking. Okay, I'm going to start out with a poem for my daughter, Rainy Dawn, which is on the broadsheet, which I wasn't going to start out with, but I thought it would be useful. She's 16, and we had we had a crisis a few weeks ago, and I had to go up and help straighten her out. She wanted to run away with her boyfriend on the back of his black motorcycle, and I can't blame her, but she's not. Anyway, I wrote this poem when she was 13. I wrote this poem when she turned 13 because I was terrified of things like this happening. And I wrote this to give her, it's a prayer, it's sort of a prayer to help her through these times and to help me through these times. And I was thinking about the day she was born, and I went back to that. And her name is Rainy Dawn, and people hear her name and think, wow, she was born on a misty morning, but she wasn't. She was born on a hot July afternoon in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when everyone was wishing for rain. So this is Rainy. This is for Rainy. Rainy Dawn. I can still close my eyes and open them 4 floors up, looking south and west from the hospital, the approximate direction of Acoma, and farther on to the roofs of the houses of the gods who have learned there are no endings, only beginnings. That day, so hot, heat danced in waves off bright car tops. We both stood poised at that door from the east, listened for a long time to the sound of our grandmothers' voices, the brushing wind of sacred wings, the rattle of raindrops in dry gourds. I had to participate in the dreaming you into memory, cupped your head in the bowl of my body as ancestors lined up to give you a name made of their dreams cast once more into this stew of precious spirit and flesh. And let you go as I am letting you go once more in this ceremony of the living 13 years later. And when you were born, I held you wet and unfolding, like a butterfly newly born from the chrysalis of my body, and breathed with you as you breathed your first breath. Then was your promise to take it on, like the rest of us, this immense journey for love, for rain. That's for Rainy. Somewhere she hears it. This next poem is called Sante Fe, I suppose in honor also of our theme. And I wrote this poem. I was sitting one morning at my computer. Let's see what time it is. And I was thinking about how every day we make choices. Actually, every moment we're making a choice to do one thing or the other. And some choices aren't particularly noticeable, and other possibilities are incredibly, immensely noticeable. And I was thinking about the time when I was either 14 or 16 or 23, standing on a street corner in Sante Fe, New Mexico, when a guy drove up to me. He was a friend. He liked Indian people, so he knew all the Indians in town. And he drove up on his motorcycle. Here's, the motorcycle again. And said, hey, I'm going to San Francisco, and I'm leaving right now. Would you like to go with me? Now, I wasn't attracted to this guy, but I was attracted to the idea of being able to totally change my life, getting on the back of a motorcycle and leaving everything there. And I thought about it, but ultimately I'm a responsible person, so I didn't do it. So the poem came out of that, and I was also thinking about the time in Sante Fe when the lilacs took over everything, and also thinking about a friend of mine there. And I was also thinking about how time really works, so I'm playing with that in this, and it's called Sante Fe. The wind blows lilacs out of the east, and it isn't lilac season. And I am walking the street in front of St. Francis Cathedral in Sante Fe. Oh, and it's a few years earlier and more. That's how you tell real time. It is here, it is there. The lilacs have taken over everything, the sky, the narrow streets, my shoulders, my lips. I talk lilac. And there is nothing else until a woman the size of a fox breaks through the bushes, breaks the purple web. She is tall and black and gorgeous. She is the size of a fox on the arm of a white man who looks and tastes like cocaine. She lies for cocaine, dangles on the arm of cocaine, and lies to me now from a room in the De Vargas Hotel where she has eaten her lover white powder on her lips. That is true now. It is not true anymore. Eventually space curves, walks over and taps me on the shoulder. On the sidewalk I stand near St. Francis. He has been bronzed a perpetual tan, with birds on his hand, his shoulder, deer at his feet. I am Indian, and in this town I will never be a saint. I am 17 and shy and wild. I have been up until 3 with a party, but there is no woman in the De Vargas Hotel, for that story hasn't yet been invented. A man whose face I will never remember and never did drives up on a Harley Davidson. There are lilacs on his arm. They spill out from the spokes of his wheels. He wants me on his arm, on the back of his lilac bike, touring the flower kingdom of San Francisco. And for a piece of time the size of a nickel, I think maybe. But maybe is vapor, has no anchor here in the sun beneath St. Francis Cathedral, and space is as solid as the bronze statue of St. Francis, the fox breaking through the lilacs, my invention of this story, the wind blowing. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of new pieces. There's no water here? Okay. This one is called Northern Lights, and I feel like they're halfway between stories and poems. And this one, I was up in Ashland, Wisconsin last spring. I did a reading for the Indian Student Awareness Days. And there was a powwow. It's the kind of powwow I like because it was a community powwow. There wasn't the contest dancing, and so everyone could dance. And so I was there, I got to dance, and I started talking to this man who was very intense, and he came up to me and he said he was a writer and introduced me as the father of this 18-year-old young woman who was also beginning to write, and who had also, at 18, was sober for the first time in her life since she was about 13, as was her father. So it was quite a time of celebration for the both of them. And he came up to me and we started talking about writing, and he was carrying something, a story so immense that he couldn't keep it in. And so he told me this amazing story that no one in here would believe anyway. So what I decided to do, I carried this story with me, and I decided that I would write this story down, or some version of it, not particularly his story. So I started making up a story that would lead up to the story he told. And what happened was, when I got to the story he told, I realized that that was his story and it belonged to him, and I couldn't tell it. And so I say that in this piece. But and so I'll read it. It's called Northern Lights. Northern lights were sighted above Lake Michigan as we danced concentric circles around the drums at Ashland, each step bringing us through the freezing. Bells, the occasional sacred flute like wind beneath an eagle, and the drum marking more than time, rather outlining ancestors, a pipeline into the earth to the mother of volcanoes. I noticed whirling soldier beneath the garish lights of the auditorium. He trusted nothing, still broke swords with angry gods. His war scars were evident in the way his eyes flinched and burned with gunpowder from the recurring horror of his decapitated ditchmate draped on the trees, spilled across him. We talked wild rice, modern fiction, and of his daughter who was hitting 18 sober after drinking away adolescence. And we were proud to watch her dance by us, her eyes on fire with the intimate knowledge of survival from the abyss. She carried her niece, his granddaughter, who was laughing to see so many grandmothers, so many relatives. He had returned from the war, from Wichita, with a spirit feather pressed against his heart. The killing wind chafed his lips. There were no prayers anymore. All he knew, he was leaving Nam and approaching the destruction of his people by laws. The northern lights were reminiscent of mercy gathering on the horizon. Sometimes he thought he saw them in Nam. Or was it fire from the unseen enemy, which could have come from the boy from Ohio in the foxhole next to him, or the gook rattling the bush who appeared as his cousin Ralph, an apparition, making an offering of the newest crop of wild rice? He was killing himself, he thought. Each shot rigged his spine to hell. There was no way to get out. He was in it, and knew the warrior code had said nothing about the wailing of children in the dark. The sacrifice reminded him of his mother stuffing wood into the stove, cooking potatoes in the gray before dawn, before she went to clean houses. They never had enough to eat. He always went to find his father instead of going to school with his sisters, his stomach warm with potatoes and coffee, sometimes fresh deer meat when they were lucky. Suddenly he was in Vietnam, a man as his father had been when he had found him floating on ice in the lake. His father had been fishing for redemption when his heart gave out. The empty bottle scudded away, slipped into the river, an epitaph read by fish drinking in the lake. Under fire, the image of his father on ice often took hold through the scope, and his teeth would chatter in the hot, damp jungle as if he were freezing, but he couldn't put his rifle down. And nothing killed the image, kept it from growing on its own. Soon it was spring, and the lake thawed, and his father sunk to the bottom. Deer stopped to drink. Clouds surfaced in the blue. He made it through summer, was shot clean through, missed the shin bone while flying on heroin, making volcanoes of the bush. By then he couldn't see through to the surface of the lake. He was lucky to be able to walk, climb up the muddy bank, make it to Wichita after the blur of San Francisco, Oklahoma City on his way home. In Yuma, in the hangover of a dream of his mother beating a blanket in his honor, he tore the medals from his pack and pawned them for a court. He snuffed his confusion between honor and honor with wine, became an acrobat of pain in the Indian bars of Kansas. One of those mornings, no different than any other except for the first taste of winter, reminded him of the beginning of the world, and he imagined his mother wrapping a deer meat sandwich in a plastic bread wrapper. When he opened the door, his breath took the form of question marks, imitated clouds over water. His father sat up on the sagging bed, coughed, asked him where he was going. But he didn't hear the question until years later, as he staggered up some state road north of Wichita with a pint of Seagram's tucked in his pants, the staccato of machine guns still stuttering in his memory. What must have been the head crow laughed from a stiff telephone wire, swung back and forth beneath the sun, blinking his eyes at the sleeping, pitiful world. Whirling soldier muttered, his voice broke off in waves. He wished he had a cigarette. The eye of a dried sunflower reminded him his baby would be too, but she too had probably disappeared in the azimuth of forgetfulness. He unscrewed the cap of his final fix. His last fight did not involve the clockwork of artillery, but a punch that shattered the mouth of a man who looked like his brother. He staggered away from the man who whimpered like a child into the shiny blood pool and threw up in the weeds, breaking the sidewalk. Suddenly, the high winds of violence that chased him from fight to fight found him north of Wichita, at dawn, talking to a spirit who had never been a stranger, but a relative he had never met. I can't tell you what took place beneath the blessing sun, for the story doesn't belong to me, but to Whirling Soldier, who gifted me with it in the circle of hope. After the dance, we all ran out onto the ice to see the northern lights. They were shimmering relatives returned from the war, dancing in the skies all around us. It was an unusual moment of grace for fools. I'll read this one. I was going to read a different one. This one's called The Dawn Appears as Butterflies. And last September, I went up to Tuba City to read poetry and teach some classes at the high school there, which are mostly Navajo and Hopi students. And I went a day earlier so I could see some friends of mine's daughter dance the butterfly dance. It was her first dance at Hopi. And when I got there, I went to their mother's house, and she said, I don't know that whether you've heard this or not, but Steve died. That was the daughter's father, and they decided to go ahead with the dance because they had all planned it together, and they knew that he would have wanted her to dance. And so I was going back and forth. I stayed with Rose for like the next 3 or 4 days. And we talked a lot and laughed and got through it. And so I wrote this piece, at least the first draft of it, the morning that she left to go bury her husband. But one thing that we really had a good laugh about is that she had to go pick the clothes out to bury him in. And there was this shirt. She says, here's the shirt. This shirt, he hated this shirt. I bought this shirt for him in Flagstaff, and I always wanted him to wear this shirt, and he would never wear it. So, we thought, okay. That would have been a good final joke, but but she didn't do it. So this is The Dawn Appears as Butterflies. You leave before daybreak to prepare your husband's body for burial at dawn. It is one of countless dawns since the first crack of consciousness, each buried in molecular memory, each as distinct as your face in the stew of human faces, your eyes blinking back force in the vortex of loss and heartbreak. I put on another pot of coffee, watch out the kitchen window at the beginning of the world, follow your difficult journey to Flagstaff, through rocks that recall the scarlet promises of gods, their interminable journeys and pine. Until I can no longer see, but continue to believe in the sun's promise to return. And it will this morning, and tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow, building the spiral called eternity out of each sun, the dance of butterflies evoking the emerging. 2 nights ago, you drove north from the hospital at Flagstaff after his abandonment to the grace we pursue as wild horses the wind. Your grief was the dark outlining the stars. One star in particular waved to you as you maneuvered in the nightmare of the myth of death. It broke loose, stammered, then flew, marking the place between the star house of the gods and Third Mesa. You laughed with the spirit of your husband who would toss stars, and your tears made a pale butterfly, the color of dawn, which is the color of the sky of the next world, which isn't that far away. There is no tear in the pattern. It is perfect. Like our gradual return to the maker of butterflies, or our laughter as we considered the joke of burying him in the shirt you always wanted him to wear, a shirt he hated. Someone is singing in the village, and the sacredness of all previous dawns resonates. That is the power of the singer who respects the power of the place without words, which is as butterflies returning to the sun, our star in the scheme of stars, of revolving worlds. And within that, the power of the dying is to know when to make that perfect leap into everything. We are all dying together, though there is nothing like the loneliness of being the first or the last, and we all take that place with each other. In the West, at every twilight since the beginning, the oldest spirits camp out with their dogs. It is always in the season just before winter. It is always shooting star weather, and they wash dishes by dipping them in river water warmed in a bucket. Coffee heats over the fire. Crows take their sacred place. The sun always returns, and butterflies are a memory of the one loved like no other. All events in the universe are beautifully ordinary. Even miracles occur ordinarily, as the spirits travel to the moon, visit distant relatives, as always. Then at dusk they share the fire that warms the world and sit together remembering everything, recounting the matrix of allies and enemies, of sons and daughters, of lovers and lovers. Each molecule of the sky and earth an explosion of memory within us. In this fierce drama of everything we are at this juncture of our linked journey to the Milky Way, as your babies stir in bittersweet dreams while you travel to your most difficult goodbye, as Grandma lies down with them to comfort them, as your father's truck starts down the road in the village, as a dog barks, everything is a prayer for this journey as you shut the door behind you in the dark. Wings of dusk, wings of night sky, wings of dawn, wings of morning light. It is sunrise now. Okay, I'm going to end with She Had Some Horses, which again is the poem I get asked most about, and it's the poem I have almost nothing to say about. That's a warning, but people still always come up and ask me. Again, I want to thank you for being here and the opportunity to read. She had some horses. She had horses who were bodies of sand. She had horses who were maps drawn of blood. She had horses who were skins of ocean water. She had horses who were fur and teeth. She had horses who were clay and would break. She had horses who were splintered red cliff. She had some horses. She had horses with long pointed breasts. She had horses with full brown thighs. She had horses who laughed too much. She had horses who threw rocks at glass houses. She had horses who licked razor blades. She had some horses. She had horses who danced in their mother's arms. She had horses who thought they were the sun, and their bodies shone and burned like stars. She had horses who waltzed nightly on the moon. She had horses who were much too shy and kept quiet in stalls of their own making. She had some horses. She had horses who liked Creek stomp dance songs. She had horses who cried in their beer. She had horses who spit at male queens who made them afraid of themselves. She had horses who said they weren't afraid. She had horses who lied. She had horses who told the truth, who were stripped bare of their tongues. She had some horses. She had horses who called themselves horse. She had horses who called themselves spirit and kept their voices secret into themselves. She had horses who had no names. She had horses who had books of names. She had some horses. She had horses who whispered in the dark, who were afraid to speak. She had horses who screamed out of fear of the silence, who carried knives to protect themselves from ghosts. She had horses who waited for destruction. She had horses who waited for resurrection. She had some horses. She had horses who got down on their knees for any savior. She had horses who thought their high price had saved them. She had horses who tried to save her, who climbed in her bed at night and prayed as they raped her. She had some horses. She had some horses she loved. She had some horses she hated. These were the same horses. Thank you.